Hello everyone, we are from Group 1 and we are going to present our movie and analysis. So these are the group members, so let's get started.
So, to give you a synopsis of Good Will Hunting, it is about Will Hunting, who is played by Matt Damon, and he has a genius level IQ but chooses to work as a janitor at MIT. He loves spending time alone in his apartment reading. When he's not reading, he's hanging out with his friend or working. There is one math professor at MIT named Gerard Lembeau, and he likes to put an extremely complicated math problem on the hallway chalkboard to see if any of his students are up to the challenge. Turns out they're not, but of course, Will knows how to solve it, and he writes out the answers on the chalkboard when no one's watching. After leaving the second question, Professor Lemieux catches Will as he is solving the problem. This sparks the interest of Professor Gerard, and the story of Will starts when he learns about himself through therapy session that he somehow got into, also finds a way to reach his full potential as a genius. Then we have Dr. Sean McGuire, who is an estranged friend and MIT classmate of Professor Gerard. Sean McGuire was born and raised in Boston. His father was an abusive alcoholic. He went to college with Gerard Lembeau, with whom he forged a lifelong friendship. He becomes a psychiatrist specializing in counseling victims of child abuse. Devastated by his wife's death, Sean becomes a recluse, practicing only sporadically and actively refusing to have a social life.
In the early part of the movie Good Will Hunting, it was shown that Will Hunting, the main character of the movie, went for a psychotherapy session as one of the agreements with Professor Gerald Lambeau for Will to avoid going to jail because of his fight with a gang. During the first therapy, the session initially started in a good environment. The therapist was seen to make an effort trying to get information from Will by validating him and trying to make him keep going. However, Will was seen to be dodging the questions asked by the therapist. He is further avoiding the necessary questions by countering the therapist with some sensitive and insensible questions to the point that the therapist himself could not handle Will and quit the session. Meanwhile, during second therapy set by Professor Gerald with another therapist, Will is still not able to take the session seriously and even joking around while getting hypnotized. He tried to avoid answering it and instead pretended to be hypnotized by saying absurd things, which followed with him singing a song. This eventually leads to the therapist to quit the session too, and Will has confessed to Professor Gerald that he is not willing to take part in therapy session and feel like he did not even need one. This scene showed that Will has become defensive and did not want to open up with his therapist. It can be associated with Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalytic, which is the defense mechanism. These psychological techniques may aid people in separating themselves from threats or unpleasant feelings like guilt or shame. The defense mechanism consists of several techniques, and in Will's situation, it is involved with the defense mechanism of repression. Repression is defined as the unconscious suppression or of unpleasant feelings, memories, impulses, and thoughts from the conscious mind. This is applied to Will as he has difficulties in expressing his feelings and thoughts, whereby he is unable to open up with his therapist about what he is experiencing. It can be that due to the traumatic childhood, he represses thoughts and emotions by himself as a defense to the situation, as well as becoming defensive when questioned about him during the therapy sessions due to the attempts invoking his traumatic experiences. Scene can also be explained with Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, specifically the stage 1, which is trust versus mistrust. In this stage, it explained that it is what contributes to constructing our view of the world and generally our personality. Failure in this stage will lead to the development of mistrust, where they have difficulties in forming a healthy relationship. As Will grew up as an orphan and had been passed around in different foster homes, It might have resulted in him having less trust with others, and the physical abuse he had experienced during childhood. It might cause him to be more defensive to others and cause him not be able to open up, which eventually developed mistrust in him. It can explain the way he acted during the therapy sessions, in which he might not build enough trust in his therapist yet for him to open up about himself.
Okay, so for the second scene, this scene takes place after the first meeting between Dr. Sean and Will Hunting. So in this scene, Will and Dr. Sean are sitting on the bench in front of a lake while Will cracks the silence by implying that Dr. Sean has an emotional sentiment with the swans, as during their last meeting, Will saw a painting with the same scenery. Dr. Sean then ignores the remark and leads the conversation by saying that Will is just a kid, thus he does not know anything about what he was talking about during their last meeting. The first few seconds of the conversation, Will is seen as defensive. However, Dr. Sean keeps on talking and explaining, and it appears that Will's expression turns mellow and soft while Dr. Sean's face seems emotional and touched. The scene depicts both Dr. Sean and Will's characteristics. So Dr. Sean's part can be seen as very understanding person in the scene because he was very angry in the beginning. However, he came through and tried to understand the reason behind Will's behavior, and he does the concept that he did in this scene is self-disclosure, which is a concept to establish rapport with Will, and the line "unless you want to talk about you, who you are, and I am fascinated, I'm in" shows the caring person Dr. Sean is. His characteristic can be explained by Roger's belief in self-concept and humanistic theory, as Dr. Sean believed that everyone has the capability to improve, and so does Will. So the next aspect is Dr. Sean has a very hard time moving on from the passing of his wife. So here comes Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. So the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So the Dr. Sean seems to be experiencing the acceptance stage. However, he seems rather struggling about it. So because of this loss that he go through, it makes him stronger, and it appears that he wanted to give back to the society. Thus, it can be associated with Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory. In this stage, he experiences generativity, and it means that he wants to contribute something to the society. So lastly is on Will's character. It appears that he was very defensive at first of the scene. However, he sees Dr. Sean as a figure which he never had before, and it correlates with Freud's transference concept. And other than that, Will sees Dr. Sean as a possible place for him to open up. However, he is still afraid because he was a survivor of childhood abuse. So according to Kelly's theory, we see the world as what we construct, and for Will, the world is a cruel place, and like any other relationship that he have had with any adults, he anticipated that Dr. Sean will leave him, will push him away, and being defensive and aggressive is the only way to protect himself.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Sarah, and I will present scene 3 where Will argues with his girlfriend SKYLAR. So it started with SKYLAR asking him to live with her in California, but Will pushed her away by being defensive and hypothetical. He was overthinking, saying that she might find out something about him that she would not like or even regret her decision. Will continues to panic and find excuses to avoid the topic. And at one point, he outbursts with anger and tells SKYLAR that he is an orphan, he had cigarettes lit on him when he was little, and he had also been stabbed. SKYLAR was willing to listen and help him, but Will got offended and aggressive over someone being there for him, and in the end, Will says that he does not love her. For the theories related, it includes Bowlby and Ainsworth attachment theory, which is agreed by psychologists to be the best explanation for how we build relationships and relate to our surrounding. It explained that the ways we manage our needs and expectations are established in our relationship with our primary caregivers. In response to early childhood experiences and having basic biological needs satisfied, attachments may be classified as secure or insecure, and anxious or over-anxious. In this scene, Will had troubles developing an appropriate romantic relationship due to abuse during his childhood. Next, we can also relate to Alfred Adler's inferiority complex, which explains being consumed by overwhelming sense of inadequacy. In this scene, Will pushes Skylar away as soon when the relationship starts to progress because he does not feel good enough for her. He also lied about having brothers and is embarrassed with his unstable job. Next, we can relate to Freud's defense mechanism, where Will masks his inner feelings and guard his ego so that no one can hurt him. In this scene, Will portrays reaction formation. For example, when Skylar says she loves him, Will reacts in the opposite feeling, which is hatred. And here we can see that Will tries to reverse the thought of someone loving him. Lastly is Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. The abuse he experienced before led to his volatile and defensive personality. It affects his early adulthood stage of intimacy versus isolation because he grew up never being loved and appreciated. But in the end, after a few therapy sessions, Will managed to develop as he realizes that he has to move forward and leave the past. He gained self confidence and was able to take scary chances of the relationship to visit Skylar in California.
So the fourth scene is a scene where Dr. Sin uses a transference analysis approach with Will. So Will imagine Dr. Sin as the person who actually offered the job to him. So he expressed his feelings and thoughts about taking the job, and where he displays a strong objection and skeptical about it. So Dr. Sin analyzed and discussed this expression with him, but then he refuted Dr. Sin's statement, become agitated, and start to assault Dr. Sin with nasty remarks. But then Dr. Sin still remained his composure. So there are several theories that can explain this scene. So the first theory is Adler's individual psychology, where this theory explains how Will's hesitation to pursue in better profession that accentuate his true potential is because he suffered from inferiority complex that may have been driven by his terrible upbringing, and where have tempered his normal function in striving for superiority. So the second concept is defense mechanism by Sigmund Freud. So Will feeling uncomfortable when he confronted with Dr. Sin's queries, so he started to apply several defense mechanisms like denial, rationalization, and regression. The third theory is Horny theory of neuroses, where referring to this theory, Wills show a personality that turns against people, and this also has something to do with his traumatic childhood. So lastly is Kelly's personal construct theory, where according to this theory, people's personality are formed by how they process information. So Dr. Sin can retain his composure because he sees Will's action as a protective strategy to mask his true thoughts rather than to actually harm him.
So the scene starts when we see Dr. Sean and Professor Gerard starting to argue about Will. In this scene, the professor starts to get frustrated with Will's progress. He says that Dr. Sean needs to do something with Will because he thinks that Will is not getting better. Dr. Sean, on the other hand, believes that Will needs to want to be better at his own pace, and pushing him will only make it worse. When the argument starts to get heated, Will arrives. After Professor Gerard left, Dr. Sean proceeds to go and look at Will's file. He shares his experience of child abuse with Will. With this information, Will seems to be a little bit defensive and resentful when Dr. Sean starts to give reassurance repeatedly. Dr. Sean says that it is not Will's fault for the abuse and abandonment. After a couple of minutes, Will starts to break down in tears with an acknowledgement that it is indeed not his fault. This gives Will an open space to decide that he needs to stop being a victim of his own inner demons and start to take charge of his life. So the first theory is operant conditioning. In operant conditioning, we believe that the behavior of human is guided by its consequences. As Dr. Sean looks through Will's file, we can see multiple injuries that prove Will was abused as a child. The aggression is typically acquired through reinforcement contingency, whereby the child learns about aggression from the constant aggression being put on them. Later, this can be proved when we see that Will is no stranger to aggression. Since Will only knows how to express his feelings through aggression, we can see in this scene where Dr. Sean tries to approach Will, he pushes him a bit strongly. His first instinct is to use aggression whenever someone tries to invade his personal space. Child abuse is something that both Dr. Sean and Will experience, however, they have different behavior. That can be explained with personal construct theory by George Kelly. This theory talks about how everyone develops their own construct during the interpretation of information and experiences. Personal construct is the way every single person gathers information, evaluates, and creates interpretation, which is much like a hypothesis. The results of this investigation will influence a person's personality and how they interact with the environment. When facing aggression, Will creates a construct that he is unlovable because even his parents abandon him. He runs whenever someone tries to get close or wants to know him because he is scared that when he does let people in, and then they end up running away and leaving him. When Dr. Shaw repeatedly says it is not your fault to Will, so much care and patience are displayed, which indicates the person-centered theory by Carl Rogers. This theory emphasizes understanding and concern rather than giving advice and solution. The term self-actualization is coined by Rogers as he believes that everyone has the capacity for change and growth. Hence, Dr. Sean, being the victim of abuse himself, tried to ensure that he is not pushing him past his limit. Dr. Sean knows that in order for Will to be able to move forward, he needs to accept the fact that he is a victim of abuse and that none of it is his fault. He also needs to make Will want to accept who he is.
Based on this assignment and this movie, we learn to not judge people based on who they are, on what they are doing, because we do not know the kind of obstacles or struggles that they went through in life. And just like Dr. Sean's line implies, it is not your fault. It is not your fault that you cannot choose the environment that you want to grow up in, and but you can choose to go past that point and become better. That is all from our group. Thank you for your attention.